What is up, sweet friends, and welcome to the Imperfect Success Podcast, the podcast teaching you, a success-driven perfectionist, how to achieve your goals imperfectly. There's a phrase I've been hearing a lot from you all recently, and honestly from myself as well, and that is, help. I can barely keep my head above water. So whether you've said yes to too much, you're in a period of life where it's just capital a lot, or you're in a chapter of life where you're balancing a lot of plates in the air. These moments will happen for high achievers. There's no avoiding that. But how do we deal with them when these dreaded push periods rise to the surface? That's what we're talking about today. Let's dive in. My name is Nicole Baker-Holloman. I'm a coach for perfectionists, a recovering perfectionist, and a striver of imperfect success. Today, we're going to be talking about push periods. They're also called sprint periods. And it's ironic because actually I was just having a conversation with one of my private clients right before hopping on this podcast. She's in a sprint period. I've had a bunch of other people in this community reach out to me in the last month or so saying, oh my God, how do I keep my head above water? I'm in a sprint period. A lot of people going into the holiday season tend to be in sprint periods because it's Q4. We tend to try to wrap up a lot of projects before, Thanksgiving, Christmas, Hanukkah, all of those times come up. So we've done an episode on push periods before, and I don't want to negate that, but I do want to update it because there's some things I've changed about how I approach push periods and how I coach people through them now. And to be quite honest, I have just come out of one of the most crazy push periods I've ever had in my entire life. So this is also really fresh information for me. And to be quite honest, a lot of this stuff that I'm about to talk to you about today, I would have done a lot more if I had had this episode previous to this push period of mine. There's a lot of things that maybe in hindsight I could have done differently. And so this is almost like what I wish I had known going into that push period. So first and foremost, what is a push period? A push period is a time of life. Time is obviously very subjective here. So it could be a week, it could be 2 days, it could be a month, it could be 6 months. But it is a period of life where you are just like, all right, my head is down. I need to just one thing after another. I have a lot on my plate. There's a lot of things that need to get done, and maybe some of them or all of them can't be pushed aside. They can't be put off. This is a time where it's like, all right, I have a lot on my plate and I have to eat it, and I just got to push through and go. So push periods, I think a lot of people, we try to avoid them. Obviously, there's, we'll talk at the end about how to, maybe not have them happen so much. But I do believe that, especially as high achievers, there is no avoiding push periods. They are going to happen, whether it's a fluke and you said yes to too much without realizing it, or whether just one thing after another keeps coming up, or whether you're like me and you thought something was going to be just this tiny, little fun thing on the side, and then it ends up absolutely blowing up to no end. And you're like, oh my God, what do I do? In the best way. And I'll get more into that in a second. So how do you know if you're in one? What's the line of, okay, I'm not in a push period, and then you cross it and you're like, oh crap, I am officially in a push period. In my opinion, the line is when you start to feel like, oh my God, how is this all going to get done? That is the line. For me, it's not a metric of how much is on your calendar, because that is so not what we need to hear as high achievers, because we will suddenly then look at that as the bar, and we don't want to do that. We want to not be busy. That's always the goal, because busy busy will lead to push periods. But for me, a push period is when the crossing of the threshold of that feeling of, oh my God, what do I do? How am I going to get this all done? Maybe your shoulders start to rise way too high up your to your ears. Maybe you start to think about like, oh my God, there's so much I need to get done. You start to feel anxious a lot more. And here's the thing. I've also defined push periods before, and people are like, what if that's just my life? When that happens, that tells me that you've been hustling a lot. You've been on the busy hype train that we preach as a society. That is my goal, to literally take that down a peg. But what that tells me is that you have found the habit of pushing more, busy, hustle, that's become standard. And so because of that, a push period is just how your life is in. Now, when I say that to people, they're like, oh my gosh, but then like I'll have periods of life where it's even more. And that becomes the new metric. And it's like, no. We don't want push periods to be the new metric we're striving for. Push periods are just something that happens every once in a while, and you got to put your head down and go through it. But we do not want to strive for raising the bar so that push periods keep happening. So again, push periods, you're in one when that feeling of stress of how is this all going to get done is amplified. And I'd even say amplified for more than a day. Push periods can definitely happen in a day. You just have a busier day on your plate and, those are going to happen. But for me, a push period is like, okay, it's not just a anxious day of mine. I've opened up I'd say pretty medium so about my anxiety here on this podcast. It's definitely something that I'm personally working through in my own therapeutic journey. But when I have that, oh my God, how is this all going to get done anxiety, and I see it I see it longer than a day. I see it longer than, probably I'd say 24 hours. If I'm still feeling it the next day, then I'm like, okay, I'm in a push period. This is just the part of life. So what do we do? I really categorize this in 6 different categories. What do we do when we are in a push period? How do we make it less terrifying, anxious, hard? How do we make it less hard? So number 1, we set a time limit. Setting a time limit. What does that mean? People tend to say yes to things indefinitely. They tend to add more and more to their plate because as they add more and more to their plate, they get more and more comfortable with being busy. It stretches your comfort zone to say, oh, I feel validated, I feel important, I feel worthy when I'm this busy. Therefore, my brain is going to keep striving for this busy because I'm getting really good dopamine levels of, good feedback from it. But when we say, yes, I'd love this. I'd love to do this. I'd love to do that. I can handle that project. I can say yes to this contract. When we start to say yes to too much and then we get too busy, by the way, this is not the only thing that causes a push period. It's not just from external people saying, hey, can you do this for me? It can be from a family member needing your assistance and you need to be their primary caretaker and you still feel like you need to get everything done for your normal life as well. Here's my example from this past week. My sister and I started a podcast a week and a half ago. Good Lord, it's been the longest week and a half of my life in the best way, but Jesus, I can't believe it's that recent. So we started a podcast about a week and a half ago, and it launched a week and a half ago. We started it several weeks prior. And in the preparation for this pod, we've been like, okay, like we have no community. We have no following of this. Like it's just going to be really small. We're really excited to just like have this be a fun hobby of ours to like talk about books and talk about analyzing a particular book that we're going through right now. And we posted the first episode and then we started going viral. And then we started going viral again. And it's now a week and a half later, and we're looking at about 15 viral videos on TikTok and Instagram. And through those viral videos, we've had a lot of attention on the podcast, on the YouTube, on the downloads, on the everything. We've had this crazy community just blow up overnight. And I'm very much in the camp of like, there is no such thing as an overnight success. I don't know if this is just a unicorn situation. This was one of those situations where like, oh my God, I cannot believe this is happening to me. And with all of this exciting, new community, we're getting, hundreds and hundreds and hundreds of DMs and comments and emails and all of this stuff. It's like, oh my God, this is so cool. And I'm still working on my business. I'm still editing. I'm doing all of the editing and the social media like clips and promos and everything. My sister's doing the social media management, but I'm doing all the editing for the show. And these are like 2-hour episodes. Like they're really long. And we also had a bonus episode last week because there was a huge announcement. So like there's just a bunch of things that were happening around this. And I suddenly looked at my life and I realized, oh my God, what has happened? Like there is not a second of my day where I am not consumed by something for either my business or for this podcast. And I don't say that as a bad thing. Like every single second of this has been, there's been stress. I will not even lie to you all. I have definitely cried because I'm like, how am I going to get all this editing done? I am terrified. Like to be frank, if I'm editing a 2-hour podcast, it takes me about 6 to 8 hours in the back end to edit everything for the show. So like keep that in mind as we're going through this. It's a big time commitment because I'm also being very particular with the editing, which I'll talk about more in segments later. So all of this to say is that I realized, oh my God, I am in a push period. So my first thing that I did, because I did do this one thing of the things I'm going to tell you today, I did do this one thing. And I said, when is this going to end? When am I going to take a bigger breather? And when is it going to be like, okay, we're good. Everything's fine. This is just manageable. And for me, it was, okay, it's the first week. There's a lot of commotion happening around the show, which is awesome. And we're also releasing 4 episodes in a week, each of them from anywhere from 37 minutes to 2 hours. So because of that, I knew that first week was going to be insane. So I said, okay, this is my push period right now. On Tuesday, so yesterday, at least at the time I'm recording this, Tuesday the 19th, it ended. And I was able to fucking breathe and it felt so good. But that was the first thing I did was set a time limit. When is this ending? This does 2 things in our brain. Number 1, it gives us a mini goal to look forward to. It gives us okay, that's the light at the end of the tunnel, which makes it feel less like it's in perpetuity. Like it makes it feel less like this is just going to be forever how it is, which can feel very daunting. It can feel very hopeless if we dread on it too much. The second thing it does is it gives you a time limit to say, okay, maybe a month from now, that is when I'm going to be able to finally say yes to new projects. Or maybe a week from now, great, I'm going to be able to see my friends again because I'm out of this push period. Or I'm going to be able to, take a big deep breath and really enjoy this time. So the time limit is really there for when you're done. It's a brain technique to make you feel like you're not living in a never-ending tunnel. But the second thing it does is it allows you to feel like you're able to make plans again. You're going to be able to say yes to things without it feeling like, oh my God, this is way too much. It reminds you that there is more to life than this push period. So number 1, if you are in a push period right now, set a time limit. When is this going to end? Number 2, stop saying yes. There are going to be exceptions to this, and we'll talk about it, but stop saying yes. In this last week, I have said no more times than I can count. There's actually been moments where I've literally just not even responded, and I have never done that in my life. And that's been kind of like, whoa, okay, this has been a lot. And the reason is because I was like, I cannot internally comprehend making any commitments right now because it will just feel like I'm stacking more and more on my plate. So I immediately was like, okay, no more saying yes to things because this week it is absolutely keep your head above water. And when we keep saying yes to things, it just makes the water rise over and over and over again. I say this very particularly, and I'm going to say this throughout this episode. When you say yes to things, especially when you're in a push period, you are doing that to yourself. Ooh, talk about a slap in the face. You are doing that to yourself because when we say yes, when we are so overwhelmed, you are doing yourself a disservice. When you do that, you are doing yourself a disservice. You are not because I say this a lot to people pleasers. If you are trying to make it easier for everyone else's life, but you're making it way harder on yours, is the quality of your work or the quality of what you're going to do for them going to be the same amount? You're just going to make yourself miserable. And in the process, how is that going to help them? How is that going to help them? Yes, you might take something off their plate, but you know what would be even better is saying, hey, right now, I really don't have the capacity to do that, but maybe in a month I will. But right now I can't. So stop saying yes. Now, my exception to this right here is if this is something that it's like, I cannot miss this opportunity. You know the phrase, like, if it's not a fuck yes, it's a no. This is like capital F fuck yeses only. So for instance, this past week, there was one thing that was a capital F fuck yes. I said yes to that. And I made sure it was after the push period. That was my big choice. I said yes to it, but I made sure it was not during this week. Now, I did do another one that was during that week, and that was adding a bonus episode to this craziness, but I did that very mindfully. I did that very intentionally. I didn't just like grasp at straws to be like, oh yes, we have to do that. I instead said, okay, this is going to add a lot more onto my plate. Is this worth it? And for me, the answer was still a absolutely fuck yes. And so I said, okay, I'm adding something more to my plate. It's going to be a lot, but I'm doing this intentionally and mindfully so that I know I am still in control. When we're in push periods, it can feel very much like we're grasping at straws, like we're flailing, like we are out of control. But this is where I'm saying you can say yes to things, but make sure you do it with intention and mindfulness. You want to know what one of the most searched for terms in this podcast is? Overwhelm. And of course it is. We've got 12 goals we're currently working on. Our to-do lists have been written and most likely rewritten in 7 different places. You said yes to way too many people when you were feeling social last Tuesday, and to top it all off, because you're so overwhelmed, you're scrolling through social media, seeing these amazing people accomplishing these amazing things, and then you beat yourself up because you should be doing more. Overwhelm is taking over society. And because of this, I've spent the past year studying the neuroscience of overwhelm and how it affects high achievers. And through all that research, I created an exercise that now leaves most of my private clients in tears of relief after we do it together. But now that exercise is available for you too. Over the Overwhelm is a mini course teaching you a short 15-minute exercise on how to actually get yourself out of overwhelm. Because when we're in overwhelm, the last thing we need is like a 2-hour masterclass to watch. We need a 15-minute done and dirty exercise. But because here at Imperfect Success, we believe in knowing the science behind why we do things, I've also included an explainer video for this reason that goes behind the neuroscience of why overwhelm exists in our brains in the first place, especially as high achievers. But also, because I believe in going above and beyond for you people and your amazingness, I've included troubleshooting videos that address the main causes of overwhelm and how to stop it in its tracks. This mini course has quickly become the most popular here at Imperfect Success / Life Coach Baker. And the best part is it's $30 and it's yours to watch again and again and again whenever overwhelm comes up. You can get more information about Over the Overwhelm by clicking the link in the show notes. Now, let's get back to the episode. Number 3, choose which habits are non-negotiables. I was just talking about this with a client, and she was saying how she's in a push period, and she was saying how her habits have just gone completely out the window, which is fair. That happens. We're just like, again, we're flailing. But one of the things I asked her was, okay, which habits make you feel the most grounded? Which habits make you feel the most grounded? It's not going to be all of them. Note, I didn't say which habits make you feel grounded, because that might be all of them. Which habits make you feel the most grounded? So for me, I would look at this and say, okay, which habits make me feel the most grounded? Moving my body is a big one. Going to bed on time is a huge one. And that's about it. Those are my 2 non-negotiables: moving my body, going to bed on time. So that means cooking dinner went out the window. I ate out more last week than I have probably in months and months and months in my life, because I was truly like, this is not a non-negotiable for me. I can have pizza this week multiple times, and that is fine. I don't care, because I need to go to bed on time. That's more important to me. That also meant leaning on my husband more. I said, hey, I cannot get dinner tonight. Can you please do that? He's also in a push period at work, so that meant we had to have a conversation. I've been taking on more dinners since he's been in a push period, so I needed to lean on him and ask that of him, and he is amazing. He, of course, was like, duh, absolutely. So that also means that for me, moving my body looked different. yes, it was a non-negotiable. Moving my body is a non-negotiable activity. However, this meant I didn't go to the gym and work out for an hour every day like I normally do. Instead, I said, okay, what's something I can do for 20 minutes? What's a 20-minute exercise I can do that still makes me feel good, still makes me feel like I'm moving my body, but is not the full amount? So that's something I want to ask you. Like, can you adjust these if it is still going to feel like a lot? One of the big things that if you're like, I don't know which one makes me feel the most grounded, ask yourself, which ones allow you to recharge? Which ones allow you to recharge? Which habits do you have right now as foundational habits for yourself? By the way, foundational habits. This is not adding new habits. This is not saying, I never meditate in the morning, but you know what is a habit that should be a non-negotiable for me? Meditate. No, this is not the time for that. This is, what are my foundational habits right now? Which ones make me feel the most grounded? Which ones allow me to recharge? And which ones are non-negotiables, but I can adjust? So those are the 3 questions I want you to ask yourself. Which ones make you feel the most grounded? So for me, for instance, one of the ones that used to make me feel the most grounded during push periods was putting my phone away. But this go round, that wasn't, I intentionally made that not an option for me. There's a lot of things happening for this show on TikTok, right? Especially TikTok. And now it's starting to happen more on Instagram, which is awesome, which means that I am choosing very actively to be in my phone, be in the comments, be in the DM, because I want to respond to everyone I possibly can at these early stages. That is deeply, deeply important to me because this is a fan base I care about so deeply. And I wanted to give them the time and attention as much as I possibly could. I do this in Life Coach Baker as well, but I've never gone viral 13 times in 1 week in Life Coach Baker, so it looked a little different this week. So for instance, that habit that used to be a absolutely, this would make me feel the most grounded is putting my phone away. That one I intentionally said, you know what? I'm choosing not to do that this week. It also had a very different air around it because this is something exciting and new, so it didn't really drain me at all, which I found very interesting and weird, but that's for another episode. Then also, which ones allow you to recharge? Which foundational habits allow you to recharge? For me, this was sleeping. Sleeping, going to bed on time, non-negotiable. So which ones allow you to recharge? That becomes a non-negotiable for you. And then looking at your habits that make you feel the most grounded, that allow you to recharge. Are there any that you can adjust to make easier during this push period? Again, working out for an hour versus working out for 20 minutes. Number 4, I've alluded to this, but this is a reminder I want you all to hear again and again and again. During push periods, you are in control here. And remind yourself of that often. You are making decisions on how you want to spend your time. Even if it feels like you are flailing, even if it feels like you're trying to say yes to everyone, even if it feels like that project is eating at your life, you are still making decisions on how to spend your time. If this is something you feel obligated to do for work, you are still making decisions on how to spend your time. Yes, of course, if you decided not to do it, there would be consequences. I'm not negating that. But take ownership over this because that allows you to feel like you are back in the driver's seat. When we're in push periods, feeling out of control does not help. It does not help the situation. Now, I think that there's a difference between white knuckling control here and feeling like you have to be in control of every single little thing. I don't think that works either. Every episode of this podcast, I want to talk about the gray area of personal development. Personal development tends to be talked about in very black and white. You're either working on your goals or you're fucking failure and lazy. And I can't stand that. This is a great example of where I want you to find the gray area. If we're too in control, we're white knuckling it and we're making ourselves even more stressed and more pressurized. If we are feeling out of control, we feel like we're flailing, we feel like we can barely keep our head above water, we feel like there's nothing we can do, and it's just never a good time. This is one of those middle grounds. It's taking ownership over the fact that you are spending your time intentionally in these moments. So for instance, for me, I felt really out of control in this past week. I was like, oh my God, there's 45 things that I could be doing at any given moment, from replying to emails, replying to YouTube comments, replying to TikTok comments, editing an episode, writing an outline for the next episode. These episode outlines are like 28 pages long. They're really fucking long outlines, so they take a long time to write. So at any given moment, there are so many things I could be doing. And if I tried to do all of those at the same time, I would have felt so out of control. So instead I said, okay, pick one. I have 5 minutes right here. Great. I'm going to reply to 5 DMs on TikTok. Great. I'm going to, I have 10 minutes here. I'm going to do another 10 comments on YouTube. Like, I chose my time very deliberately, and I chose to do one task at a time. That changed the game for me. It made me feel like I was in control way more than I would have felt if I had just tried to do everything at once. Number 5, I want to talk about the G word, guilt. When we are in push periods, we tend to look at all the things that we're not doing. So like, let's say, for instance, you're in a push period at your day job and you have a dream of being a, actor in LA, and you're not able to go to as many auditions or submit to as many auditions when you are in this heavy push period at work because you're trying to get a lot done for the company. It can feel so guilt-wrenching, gut-wrenching, guilt-wrenching. I'm making up new words here. It can feel so guilt-wrenching to say, I can't go to this audition. I'm giving up on my dream. We tend to think very all or nothing, very like, this is how it's going to be forever. Again, that's why setting the time limit is so important. But it feels very much like, oh my God, I'm giving up. I'm giving up on my dream. Or, oh my God, I'm not able to spend as much time with my family. I'm a terrible mom. Or, oh my God, I'm not able to, I'm focusing too much on money. I'm a bad person because I'm trying to be, there's so much guilt and all this stuff. It's because we always are looking at what are we not doing when we're in push periods rather than the ample amount of things we are doing in push periods. So here's the reminder I really want you to have at the forefront of your brain when you are in a push period. You are not going to be able to do your normal at 100%. And lol, 100% for high achievers is like, it's failure for most of us in our brains. It's instead, you're not going to be able to do the 135% you normally do. But that's okay. So for example, if you have 5 categories in your life, you have family, you have career, you have adventure, you have all these different things. And you have a push period that is heavily influenced in one area. You cannot expect yourself to be at 135, even 100, even 80% in the other 4 categories. You're going to make yourself feel crazy, crazy, crazy flaily. So instead, it's looking at those 4 other areas and saying, okay, which is my secondary right now? Great. Family? Awesome. I'm going to give that 75. The rest, maybe 20. Again, this is why the time limit is so important. So important. And by the way, I didn't say this during the time limit. If you don't have one, if there's not like a hard deadline for a project, or like for me where I was like, okay, there's not 3 episodes releasing next year. There's not 3 episodes releasing next week. I know that that's going to be when the push period ends. Decide one. Make one up. It does not matter. It's just for our brains. It's a hack for our brains to feel like this is not going to be forever. So just make one up. It's totally fine. I give you permission. So you are not able to give your other areas of life 100%, and that's okay. It's not to guilt yourself up a wall. Instead, it's to say, okay, you know what? Right now, my relationship is going to take a smidgen bit of a back seat for a week. Great. Right now, I actively decided that last week, and I actually talked to my husband about it. He's in a push period at work too, like I mentioned, and him and I said, okay, right now, we are both in a period where we understand we're not going to see a lot of each other. And that's okay, because when we do see each other, we're going to make it count. And at the end of this, we are going on such a date, I can't even tell you. I'm so excited. And that was something for us to look forward to at the end of this push period. And last but not least, number 6, when you come back, speaking of dates, when you come back, number one, have something to look forward to. And number two, ease it up. Ease it up. It's going to feel uncomfortable, by the way. Easing it up is going to feel really uncomfortable. I am feeling really uncomfortable this week. I'm not going to lie to you. I see a lot of blank space and I'm like, oh my God, I should be editing. And it's like, I don't have anything to edit right now. Like, stop it, Nicole. So when we are in a push period, especially when we've been in a push period for a long time, maybe unknowingly, maybe intentionally, doesn't matter. That push, that sprint, that hustle becomes comfortable. It is literally our comfort zone adapts to it because our comfort zone says, oh, this makes you feel important. This makes you feel special. This makes you feel worthy because you're contributing to society in a busy, busy way. Great. This is a good thing. I'm going to make this your comfort zone. This feels good. So when we slow down, it is like one of the most polar opposite out of our comfort zone things we can do. And it's going to feel fucking uncomfortable. So I want you to know that because I want you to prepare for it. I want you to know that when you come back from a push period, because you have an end date set to it, it's going to feel weird to ease it up. It's going to feel weird. So for instance, when you were talking about don't say yes, unless like it's something that's after the push period, be very mindful about that week you come back, or even the first 2 days you come back, making it so that push period, those yeses are not going to be in those few days because then it's just going to extend the push period. Instead, come back and give yourself some easy days. And when I say easy days, I'm talking like, what's the bare minimum I need to do today? The absolute bare minimum. Talk about something that freaks high achievers out. That question right there. What's the bare minimum I need to do today? They're like, oh my God, I'm going to be mediocre. Oh my God, I'm not going to be worthy. Oh my God, I'm not going to be, the best in the room. That's okay. For 2 days, I think that's fucking okay to give yourself some mental sanity and to bring yourself back to earth. So for example, today, I'm taking a half day. I am taking a half day today. I'm recording this morning. I'm recording an episode for the new podcast, and then I am pausing. I'm going to go get groceries. I'm so excited because I can finally cook again without wanting to lose my mind. So really and truly, I want you to think about how can you ease it up. And one of the things I talked about with another client of mine was how can you go at 85%? He's someone who tends to be very 125 plus. And we asked, what does 85% look like here? So for me, it's what does 55% look like today? What does 55% look like today? And I'm not going to lie, I love that question. It feels really good. Now, does that mean that this is what I'm going to do forever? Of course not. I'm still a high achiever, but it means that for a few days after a mega push period, I'm giving my brain a chance to come back to earth. And if we don't do that, we burn out. If we don't do that, we continue the push period and that becomes our normal, which might be what a lot of you all are realizing you're in right now. Come back, give yourself some ease, give yourself something to look forward to. Like I said, my husband and I, after his push period, are going on a date. I think we're going to go to a spa. I'm so excited. I can't wait to spend that time with him and to relax and to just celebrate what this crazy, crazy experience has been like for both of us. So those are the 6 things that I recommend doing when you're in or when you're about to get out of a push period. Let's talk about maybe not how to avoid them, but how to make sure they don't happen as often as maybe they're happening right now. So number 1, know your limits. Know your limits. I know if I have this much in my calendar, I know that I'm going to feel like I'm in a push period. I know that if I say yes to 2 external projects a month, I know I'm going to feel like I'm in a push period because those projects have a lot of hours behind them, right? I know that if I start a new podcast now, that if it blows up on TikTok, I'm going to feel like I'm in a push period. And that's okay. It's just to know your limits. Again, going back to number 4, it's to give yourself that you are back in control. You are back taking ownership of it. Know your limits. And that brings me to number 2 on how to lessen these happening. Develop the habit of saying no to things that are not yeses. I'm not going to say fuck yeses, because maybe those don't happen all the time. And maybe you're at the beginning of a career, or maybe you're at the beginning of building a business and you're like, I don't have a whole lot of fuck yeses coming to my doorstep. I didn't when I first started. Absolutely not. But now I'm at the point where I'm like, okay, I get, some yeses that are like, hell yeah, I like that. It's like a 75%. If I'm not doing anything and I know it's not past my limits, great. I'll say yes to that. Hell yes. If I get something that comes around my doorstep nowadays though, and it's like, ugh, I don't know if I like that very much, I'm saying no. Now, a year ago, that would have looked different. I would have said, okay, you know what? Maybe not a year ago, but maybe 2 or 3 years ago, I would have said, okay, you know what? I'm in the build business stage of business. Maybe I need to say yes to a few things that I'm kind of like, I don't really know. I would personally, that would require some one-on-one coaching and seeing if it aligns with your values. Because if it doesn't align with your values, that's a no. Absolutely not. No. Which is another way on how to avoid push periods. But it's being mindful about the yeses and the nos rather than defaulting to the people pleasing of, oh yeah, absolutely, I don't want to disappoint you. Because if it's, I don't want to disappoint you, we're not saying yes for the right reasons. So this is push periods. This is sprint periods. If you are in one right now, please feel free to send me an email. I'm here for you. I'm so here for you. And honestly, if an email takes too long, send me a DM on Instagram and do a voice note. Those are so much faster. And there's a reason why I tend to respond to a lot of people in voice notes. I'm also a podcaster, so I like talking more than I like writing. But I strongly recommend reach out to someone. It doesn't have to be me, but I am here for you. But reach out to someone and it just helps you feel like you are less alone. Seriously, because push periods can feel really, really lonely. Friends, let's wrap up this episode. Quick segments, goal to celebrate. I've talked about this a million times in this episode, but a podcast that was supposed to be a hobby, which was awesome, dropped, and it turned into a much bigger hobby than I imagined it being. For context, Lexi and I, my sister and I, we started the show and our goal was like 20 downloads the first week. We were like, oh my God, if we can get 20 downloads, we would feel so proud. We would feel so proud of ourselves if we got 20 downloads. We got just shy of 5,000 the first week. And we are halfway through week 2 and we're almost at 10,000. I truly don't think I've comprehended this yet. I don't think I've comprehended what's happening right now. For those of you who maybe don't know downloads and like what this means exactly, here's a different form of context. We found out we were at one point number 4 in our category on Spotify. Last week, we were number 7 in our category on Apple Podcasts last week, and I almost puked in a bucket when I found those out. It was absolutely crazy. So just seeing what this has become is so cool. So I say that this is a goal to celebrate. My sister and I are finally meeting up today. We haven't seen each other like other than just through cameras since this popped off like this. So I am celebrating like crazy with her today and just breathing in what a crazy wild ride this past week has been. How was I a perfectionist this week? I think a better question was, how was I not a perfectionist this week? I really actually went to a lot of default perfectionist programming. I'm going to be super honest with you all, because I think I believe in being very transparent about this. I had a really hard time accepting what a big deal this was. And I'm not going to lie, I'm still there. I'm still figuring out how to really accept and feel the weight of what's happening with all of this and the community that has just sprung up overnight. And gratitude doesn't even begin to cover it. I don't know how to say it, but when it comes to perfectionism, there's a reason I don't edit my podcast on this podcast anymore. It's because I am such a perfectionist when it comes to editing my own stuff. I take out every single little thing, and it tends to make it just very highly polished and maybe sometimes not in the best of ways. But I had a absolute panic attack because I was so afraid that the editing for Fantasy Fangirls, this new podcast, got too perfect. It was too edited and it was too choppy as a result. And so at like 11:59 the night before the new episodes dropped, where like we finally realized, oh my God, there's like a community behind this. People are listening to this. So we had 2 episodes drop, and I was freaking out over those 2 episodes because I wanted them to be good. I truly just wanted them to be worthy of this audience we're creating. And I made myself really, really miserable for about 2 hours, freaking out over this whole thing I was telling myself in my head. I ended up going and listening to the episodes, and they were fine. They were totally fine. It was totally just my own anxiety. But I do realize that the perfectionist in me, when it comes to editing, came out real hard this past week. So that's just something I'm now being mindful going forward as to what can I look like. Again, how can this be an 85% rather than maybe 200%? My sweet friends, that's all we have for today. Reminder to go get over the overwhelm. If you are in a push period, especially if you are feeling overwhelmed in this push period, I don't think that it's possible to not feel overwhelmed in a push period. So friendly reminder, that is a resource here for you. So go get it. The link is in the show notes for that mini course, and it's super, super short. It's not something that takes a lot of time, because when we're overwhelmed, when we're in push periods, we don't have a lot of spare time. It's a 15-minute exercise. You can literally listen to it while you are in the shower one morning. Like it's a very quick and dirty exercise that can literally change the way your brain approaches the day. But in the meantime, friends, till next time, keep striving for imperfect success. I love you all. Bye.